Nakafero. First of all, good morning and you're welcome.
Good morning to you and thank you for hosting us.
All right. I'm glad to have you. And
that's excited to participate in this important discussion.
All right. Now, Doctor, according to you, what is the current state of gender-based violence in Uganda?
Thank you very much. You really has hinted right from the start. Gender-based violence in Uganda is still high. As a country, because we've been implementing quite a number of programs, we've managed to reduce physical violence from 51% in 2016 to the current 45% in 2022. Unfortunately, sexual violence has just escalated. In 2016, it was 22%. But right now, it is at 32%. So as we reduce one form of violence, unfortunately, another form of violence is increasing. We've also started to witness economic exploitation of women. Women are being economically exploited by relatives, by spouses. And of course, that doesn't help us as a country in terms of reducing poverty amongst women and girls. Much as they put in more efforts to work, but the exploitation is there. And it's not surprising that women are not as much as doing well in terms of reducing poverty. There's also the form of workplace violence. It is really high. Different forms, emotional, verbal, physical. We've been witnessing, yes, people fight at the places of work and even in institutions where you wouldn't expect physical violence.
Like Parliament.
Like Parliament. It's really a shame.
Yes.
If we can't really discuss and solve things amicably in those highest levels of institutions, then really we are missing the point as a country. What surprises most is the violence against children. It is high. Sexual violence against girls is high. And as a country, we've witnessed so many girls who are pregnant when they are still children, below 18 years. It currently stands at 25%. So out of every 4 girls, one of them would definitely find herself pregnant before 18 years. And it's not good for us because government efforts in terms of keeping girls in school are undermined. Government efforts in terms of reducing total fertility rate is also undermined, because if a girl is going to start giving birth at the age of 15, by the time she reaches 45 years, she'll have more than 8. So total fertility rate has really remained high because we are subjecting our daughters, our girls, our girl child, the babies, even babies, to sexual violence. Associated with teenage pregnancy is the aspect of child marriage, because mainly when girls become pregnant, they are forced to go and stay with a person who made her pregnant. And before you know it, then we start having the challenge of child marriage in Uganda. So it's really very absurd that violence has persisted, and violence is also affecting the older persons. Old women have been subjected to a lot of economic violence by relatives, but also by strangers. People hiding around and, of course, exciting them into initiatives that at the end of the day, they end up losing their property. So really, as we join the 16 days, which we are concluding tomorrow, we need to reflect on the persistent levels of gender-based violence in the country. And surprisingly, even men are starting to feel it.
That's right.
As we struggle to reduce violence against women and girls, we've also seen an increasing number of boys and men who are also subjected to violence. though the rates for men and boys is still high, but it's a wake-up call for us, because we don't want to reverse the realities.
Yes.
We would want to end violence against every person in Uganda.
That's right, because it would be really self-defeating if we
Exactly.
win the fight over gender-based violence against women and girls, and now we start the fight against gender-based violence against men and boys. But now, Doctor, if you may, would you say that the 16 days of activism have helped in improving awareness when it comes to gender-based violence in the country?
Personally, I believe that within the 16 days as government, we amplify the voices of everybody. We've started amplifying the voices of men and boys. 7% of them being subjected to violence is not a joke. So within the 16 days, we amplify the voices of the vulnerable. We challenge ourselves to take deliberate actions against gender-based violence in the country. We also celebrate the gains, much as our progress has been slow, but there are also good developments that we need to celebrate at the country. For instance, we celebrate the number of laws and policies. Without the laws and policies, we wouldn't be able to undertake some of the programs that are going on. We raise awareness. At least everybody, every Ugandan knows that subjecting another person to violence is wrong. We need to start from making it unacceptable so that we start to think about enforcing the laws and policies. We've also reached out to religious and cultural institutions. Last week, Friday, I was able to engage with Church of Uganda, and of course, we're able to discuss at length their roles and responsibilities in terms of supporting the delivery of government programs. So for us, we feel that by engaging all the different stakeholders, we'll be able to tackle the issue of violence against women and girls, as well as violence against boys and men. Last week, Buganda Kingdom organized the male men's conference. One of the topics that was discussed was violence against women and girls, and of course challenging men to use their powers, resources and privileges to stop the vice. So the 16 days really, I believe, are contributing to awareness, but also commitment from the different stakeholders.
Good.
We've engaged our development partners just as we're launching. And of course, the number of activities that have been going on, we've gotten commitments from development partners expressing interest to join government in the fight against gender-based violence. So I believe the 16 days have created a difference. And I believe it has created a difference in your life.
Oh, it has.
Yes.
It has. I mean, this is a conversation we've had from the start. And I like that this is just the beginning, because talking about violence against any gender is the start. But then the work that ensues after is what's most important. And I believe different organizations and stakeholders are not really sleeping on this job. Because we can't be in, I've been saying all through last week, we can't be in 2024 and we are still talking about one person violating another person. That's unthinkable. But now coming to you, Mr. Senyange, she has talked about workplace violence and it takes many shapes and forms. Maybe first of all, help us understand the kinds of shapes and forms that workplace violence takes.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think coming from Career Motors Corporation, we believe that the future of mobility on the African continent should be driven by sustainable, solutions, and that not only meet, the global standards of excellence, but ultimately help us tackle issues like this that are facing the country, and gender-based violence being one of those, and really just to set the pace for why workplace, safety comes into perspective,
Yes.
globally, we have about 24 to 27% of the women workforce in the automotive sector. And this is still a relatively low number in terms of representation. And when you look at it further, the percentage even gets lower when you get to leadership, positions. And there's still a huge disparity between men and women when it comes to employment in that sector. And as a corporation, we are building towards having really, really good representation of female counterparts on the leadership board, but also across the different functions of the corporation. When you look at the safety champions, when you look at our gender equality committee, we got a gold, we secured gold with the United Nations Development Program Gender Equality Seal, and that really shows with the commitment. But speaking to what you've just mentioned, I think with workplace safety, like you mentioned, this shouldn't even be happening in the work. It shouldn't. Because everyone is there to do their functions and then head home.
Yes.
We don't want to create an environment that is difficult for people to perform their tasks. And this really takes different forms. And I know a lot of people really just allude to sexual harassment, but it could also be moral harassment, where someone keeps on having to defend what they are doing at a particular job because they haven't maybe provided certain favors to, say, a supervisor or other male counterparts. So it can take that form of moral and sexual harassment, but also in terms of discrimination. We continue to have conversations about gender equity and equality when it comes to equal employment opportunities, whether it comes to pay. We see it in Hollywood now when you have different actors and actresses really lobbying for equal payment.
Even in sports.
Even in sports, exactly.
Yes.
So we have that still having to be a discussion, and I think it shouldn't really be about gender. It should be about what someone brings to the table, regardless. But also we have leadership roles. We have companies, thankfully, that are starting to take shape when it comes to recruitment and having really good representation of females at that leadership role. But it could also be to what Doctor has said in terms of physical and emotional abuse. And this can be in terms of intimidation tactics, but it can also be in terms of silencing women. When you have certain spaces where voices cannot be heard because you cannot say certain things in certain spaces, because you're a woman, or and we've seen this in the past where certain meetings were only, spearheaded by men, and women are taking notes, and that has continued to change over the years. But then, most importantly, in workplaces, we have, when you don't have self or safe reporting mechanisms for when this happens, then that can be a problem, because one, people feel like there's a lot of stigma. If I report this, what is going to happen to me? But then in terms of retaliation, we've seen cases where female counterparts at workplaces report incidences, and then there's backlash, there's the hearsay, and because a lot of situations it comes with certain levels in the leadership scale in the organization, then you find the victims facing repercussions and not the people who are creating spaces for this to even happen. So in terms of workplaces, it can really take different forms. And I think it really speaks to the kind of systems and policies you have at workplaces that should have zero tolerance to any kind of sexual harassment, not only to the women, but to the men as well, because we continue to see the rise of this. And as a corporation, we have zero tolerance to that. And what we have in place are really systems that allow for fair employment, equal pay, in terms of diversity, but also most importantly, we have an operational policy around sexual harassment and just harassment in general, on providing tools on preventing, but also reporting. How do you file a complaint, and then issues to do with investigation, because you've also seen cases where you have females that file a complaint, but it's not factual, it's not, and then you end up having a male counterpart that has lost their job, and then, smear, campaigns and reputation damages being caused to the male counterparts. We see this a lot in sports. It's really apparent in sports, but you also have that in workspaces. So we have mechanisms that not only, have reports being received, but how do you do investigations? And then if it turns out that the individual is guilty, then we have disciplinary measures that are being taken to combat the issue.
Okay. Well, interesting. We are having a conversation regarding the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. I have the head of workplace safety from Chira Motors Corporation, that is Mr. Shaban Senyange, but also Dr. Angela Nakafero, who is the Commissioner Women and Gender Affairs at the Ministry of Gender and Social Labor and Social Development. Together we are delving into, first of all, the trigger factors for gender-based violence for different genders, the girls, the boys, the men, the women, but also looking at some of the efforts that have been made within the 16 days, but also the work that has happened for years now. Doctor started by saying that the 51%, because I did mention that 51% of Ugandan women report to have been physically violated at some point. And she said that due to the work that has been done, we have seen that number reduce from 51 to 45. We still have a lot of work to do, but still we have to give some flowers to the efforts that have been done. Right. Also, she did mention that sexual violence is on the rise. Now that concerns me because sexual violence takes other shapes. You are sexually assaulted or violated, but then at the end of the day, it will affect your mental well-being. So now we will now be speaking about mental illness, mental health related challenges because of one act. So it's not just one thing. One thing will spiral into other problems. Am I correct, yes, Doctor?
Yeah, you're really right. And of course, it also escalates into other aspects like transmission of sexually transmitted diseases.
Yes.
HIV is prevalent amongst young girls, especially young girls and women under reproductive health. That is because of the sexual violence that goes on. And of course, issues of teenage pregnancy for me,
yes,
it really defeats me. We failed to reduce teenage pregnancy in Uganda because of sexual violence. Yeah.
Okay. Now, Doctor, looking at everything that has been done, you did mention earlier that you had a conversation with the Church of Uganda, and I like the sound of men conferences, yes, not the one that happens in February, but the men's conferences where they are addressing issues to do with violence, among others. How important is it for us to bring religious leaders into the conversation regarding gender-based violence?
Thank you very much. Really, we've, as a country, persistence of gender-based violence is basically because of our social norms, values, and practices.
Yes.
And where we are seeing a lot of strength is the strength of people believing in God and the religious affiliations and culture affiliations. So as a ministry, and of course government of Uganda, we are strengthening our collaboration with cultural institutions and religious leaders, because basically these are the institutions, these are the gatekeepers of our values and morals and practices. I'm aware that families play a critical role, but even within the family, you'll also find that they tend to incline more to religion,
yes,
to their faith, as well as to the cultural institutions. So we are looking at culture and religious institutions to help us reshape the values and practices. I'll give you an example. For instance, female genital mutilation. That's typically a cultural practice amongst the Pokots and the Sabines. And for them, they look at it as their identity. So for us to be able to send the message that this is wrong, this is criminal, for a parent or even community members to subject their daughters to female genital mutilation, it requires that we work with the cultural institutions
leaders,
that demand that they have to perform it. We've experienced challenges in terms of enforcing some of the laws because people believe this is us. This is who we are.
Yeah.
Yes.
So who are you to tell us that we do away with our cultural institutions? Who are you to tell us that we do away with some of our religious values? So the aspect of really focusing on cultural institutions, cultural leaders, religious institutions is to support government in terms of sending the right messages on the positive norms and positive practices. What should be acceptable and what is unacceptable for us as a country in Uganda.
Okay. Well, you can join the conversation through WhatsApp number 0709602592. The number is also displayed on your screen. And we're asking for your view regarding how to end gender-based violence in Uganda. Men and women, your views are very important to us, so please send them in. You can also call directly, not through WhatsApp. You can call directly through the same number, and we'll still be able to get your opinions. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to ask the same. Now, coming back to you, Shaban, let's look at technology. Technology facilitated gender-based violence. How is it impacting women and girls, and what measures need to be taken to eliminate the vice?
Well, thank you so much. I think bringing technology into the discussion is really, really important because we are, technologically advancing as a generation, and we have a lot of young people that are using online resources for different reasons, whether it's education or employment opportunities, but a lot of young entrepreneurs also use technology to scale their businesses, right? And certain platforms also come in handy, and I just wanted to throw it back when you said the men's conference, and I said, well, we could actually use that as a platform to tap into discussions. Imagine if that men's conference in February also had a side conversation about ending. And I think it's those platforms where you have, and I'm not saying the men's conference is not serious, I don't want any man to come for me, but I'm just saying it could really, like with this generation, with the most unserious platforms, you can actually use that as an avenue to have really, really meaningful conversations. And I think that's what media does so well in terms of content creation and movies, and we've seen certain movies that really create amazing content that taps into these issues, but in such a creative way that leaves a thought-provoking, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
you're
I
right.
feel like
by the time you're done, you're not the same.
Exactly. So I feel like if we used technology and the creativity space to be able to tap into those, I think it will change the way this topic is handled, because when you talk about it, not that it's not serious, it is serious, but the weight of it, I think people would rather not have that conversation. And we've seen this as a society. When a conversation is too heavy and you have it head on, people tend to sort of draw back a little.
They will even call you boring.
Exactly. So when you find creative ways to do it, especially with the younger generation that we should be targeting, it makes it a bit exciting how the message has been portrayed. And we've seen the ministry really do this in different aspects that they're doing, and we try to implement those as a corporation. How do we find exciting ways to portray this information? Back to what you're saying, I think the impact of technology facilitated gender-based violence, there's the obvious, which is really psychological distress, where you have people with anxiety and depression, and as Doctor has highlighted, these cases have increased because you also have a lot of interface with the people and these technological platforms. And in the most extreme cases, we've seen complete withdrawal from these platforms, and people don't use these platforms anymore because of how it makes them feel and how unsafe they feel being on those platforms. And then obviously, if you're looking at it from an economic perspective, you have women entrepreneurs and young professionals that are completely withdrawing because of reputational damages. And then if you have smear campaigns where someone has been portrayed in a certain perspective, it reduces their opportunities. And so you have that complete withdrawal. And then obviously the silencing and marginalization. And we've seen this with the popular and public figures where people themselves just completely exit from public participation. And I think, you know, technology is like a double-edged sword. It can be an enabler, but it can also give us really, really good tools to be able to, you know, control the issues. And you talked about what measures should be taken. One, I think most importantly, we need to have policy and strengthening the already existing policies when it comes to cybercrime. And then how do we also create spaces where we can easily monitor and track, you know, these activities, which is a bit difficult, and we've seen efforts to do it, but the success of it, you know, is debatable. And this is because we have all these different back ends that people can still access certain sites that have been banned in the country. But then to what Dr. highlighted as well, we need to do digital literacy programs for everybody, not just women. How do we provide tools to show women and young professionals that these are the tools that you need to be able to carry out safe operations online? How do we, you know, create systems where you can report safely? And we've seen platforms like Instagram and Facebook that if there's any activity that doesn't communicate what they stand for, you can report that account and it can be taken down. How do we then translate that into a proper working setting? You know, that if there's an issue, there can be repercussions for someone to have, I don't want to say their business taken down, but there should be repercussion. And I think
to be checked.
Exactly.
For lack of a better word.
Exactly, yeah. So when you have check systems, then it really shows how important it is to have this in place. The other is really increased public awareness. And we see these campaigns happening. The men's conference can be a public, you know, campaign, whether we have...
Agreed.
We turn it
Exactly. We are turning it around. Because you mentioned the importance of having male participation. And we've seen this in the previous projects that I've been doing when it came to having family planning services, you know, in remote, you know, Kisoro. The men would come with their women to these, you know, clinics, and that completely showed a different picture. So then when you have involvement of men into tackling this issue, it really weighs heavy, and it shows the women that the men are here to support you throughout the whole process, and it's really important to have those discussions. But we start young, and then it's, you know, tackling this issue is a multi-sectoral approach. It requires that interdisciplinary approach, and collaboration with tech companies comes in handy, you know, in terms of designing systems, in terms of designing checks that can be effective, or maybe just designing tools that can provide safe working spaces for both women and men now. And I think with men it's a bit more difficult to report these issues because
Why is it more difficult?
I think, and I don't
That's
speak
important.
I don't speak for other men, but I
Yes.
think just naturally how we're built as men and as society, men are not supposed to be vulnerable. Men are not supposed to show weakness because you're supposed to be strong. And I think there's a stigma that if you report about, you know, being abused, then you come off as weak. You know, you're not going to be respected in society. And I think, then again, I go back to February. This should be an important discussion to have, and it should not be that if you come forth, you know, there's then you're weak. And I think, you know, when I was coming to this, a colleague of mine said, it's exciting, it's great that we are talking about women, but where is the boy child? You know, we should have conversations about empowerment of young boys when it comes to this, not only to support women, but also to feel safe and to feel, there's a phrase going around, holding space, holding space for both men and women when it comes to this discussion. And I think it should be taken seriously, and not just, you know, gender-based violence, but ultimately, you know, depression and anxiety, because we have more reports from women and children and not a lot of reports coming from the men about addressing that as an issue. And I think it really goes to, then again, what I said, support systems. If the support system is strong, then these conversations will happen regardless of the gender. And then lastly, yeah, supporting the victims in terms of reaching out for support. A lot of people, and this is true for workplaces, and as a corporation we have, you know, a division on health and wellness that also speaks to our mental health support. We have a helpline that people can reach, and we've tried to take it away, to take the human resource function away from the reporting so that someone doesn't feel that the company knows their business, you know, and I think it should be that. If you don't have a support system, how do we avail resources for someone to feel that they can go and talk about their issues freely to a counselor or someone who can help them without feeling that they need to be monitored, you know, like what am I reporting? Because some of that anxiety or depression could actually come from the workplace itself, and so to...
Lots of it comes from the workplace.
So how do we...
families.
And families.
Yeah.
So then how do we create a safe space for that report to come in, but from the individual themselves to feel that they need to go and seek out for help? And this really just goes to show and to also emphasize that if you are struggling with anything, please reach out for help. It's always good to reach out when the issue is still young, you know, before it escalates, because I feel like, you know, even in the public health space, people always report, you know, disease or like these issues when they've really, really escalated, and it shouldn't. When you start to feel different, when you start to feel agitated because of work, when you start to feel, when you see a certain individual, your palpitations start to rise, that is already indication that there's a problem.
Yes.
And I think you should start to reach out. And if you don't feel supported at workplaces, then reach out for professional help. Because ultimately this affects your output, it affects your performance, and we don't want to lose anyone because of the struggles that they're having at workplaces.
Right. I think Mr. Shaban Senyange has not left any stone unturned when it comes to workplace violence, and it takes different shapes really. It's not just sexual harassment, but there is all these other factors that take place in places of work. Now, Doctor, coming back to you, he has highlighted quite a lot, unpacked so much. I'll go back to the ministry where you work, that is the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. How does collaboration between the Ministry of Gender and private companies enhance the fight against gender-based violence?
Thank you very much. Maybe before I talk about the collaboration between Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, I wanted to say that Shaban has really highlighted important facts about how we are using technology. Yes. As a ministry, we are operating the Sauti. Sauti is an online reporting, toll-free. Everybody is free to use the service where you report the case. And of course, within the system, the cases are captured. Somebody is located wherever you're reporting from, and of course the support network around that person is really created. Some of the cases demand referrals. So Sauti, as the system, is able to say, if it's a case of defilement, then this girl is in maybe Kireka, then Kireka health facilities are notified about this particular case, as well as the counselors. So there's a lot we can do with IT in terms of improving our service delivery, in terms of creating awareness, but also mobilizing the men and boys to start reporting. Because by picking your phone and calling, you're going to get a response from the service providers, instead of just sitting back and waiting. And the problem escalates. As a country, we've had cases of murder. It starts as a fight at home, maybe among spouses, but if the problem is not reported, it will escalate. And the end result is somebody killing a spouse. And of course, once the case is proved that you did it, then the rest of your life you're going to be behind bars. True. There's nothing much you're benefiting Your spouse is dead, you're also behind bars for the rest of your life. So what is it that you can't sit at the table and solve before it becomes too big?
Yes.
A problem for both of you to solve. Coming back to your question, how we are working with the private sector, Ministry of Gender is running a number of programs. I'm glad that Shaban is talking about the Gender Equality Seal. This is a program which is championed by UNDP, as well as Ministry of Gender, Labour, Social Development, working closely with Private Sector Foundation. And through that program, we've managed to mobilize private sector companies that are registered on the seal to start taking up decisions and measures to improve the workspaces. In terms of prevention of gender-based violence, in terms of ensuring that the rights of the workers are protected, in terms of putting in place institutions that can help us report some of these cases. Another program where we are strengthening our work with the private sector is the GROW project. You've heard about the GROW project,
Yes.
generating growth and productivity opportunities for women entrepreneurs. Private sector is supporting the delivery of access to finance.
And you did say there is a high rise of economic harassment.
Economic exploitation.
Economic exploitation.
As private sector is delivering GROW, there's a module, there's a package on mobilizing women entrepreneurs to be able to report cases of economic violence, even other forms of violence, but also engaging their spouses not to engage women, not to subject women into violence. So it's for me, I'm looking at it as a very progressive development, because previously when we were talking about economic empowerment of women, we've not focused on gender-based violence.
Yes.
Yet it undermines the economic potential.
Now, Doctor, on that same point, many efforts have been put in place over the years
Yes,
to
please.
uplift women from poverty and give them economic independence. But then the argument has always been, when you try to do this for the women, are you speaking to the husbands? Because they are the heads of the homes.
Yes.
So you're giving this woman 1 million, let's say parish development model funds to start her business. But the
Yes.
husband is now going to feel emasculated because she now has some money. So when you're doing this, like the GROW project, amazing initiative that is, but are the men being talked to before their women are economically empowered?
We are taking deliberate efforts to ensure that we engage men. In terms of ending violence against women,
Yes.
in terms of ending economic exploitation, but also in terms of ensuring that men are supportive. Because for this particular woman entrepreneur to make it, she needs a support network around herself.
True.
And the spouse is an important person in this equation.
Yes.
So we are talking to men to support. We are talking to men to not to subject women to violence. We are also mobilizing men to be productive. Because when we go to most parts of the country, you'll find that men are not as productive as they should be. And in so doing, they leave the responsibilities to women, which is not good. Because we are not going to develop Uganda when the powerful, the most resourced, the most persons with opportunities are not equitably using all those advantages for national development.
And in most societies, the men
Exactly.
are the most powerful.
They make the
most
decisions.
They make
This
the
woman will be
decisions.
given $1 million, but she'll be told, hey, you're not going to work on my land. You have to bring part of the money. And of course, in most cases, especially when I reflect to farmers, if a woman farmer produced maybe maize, this man can come and sell this maize.
True.
And the woman will have nothing to do about it.
She tilled
So
the
this is the
land.
discussion we are engaging men, that yes, it's important, you're still powerful, you control the land, but think about this woman.
Okay. Thank you so much, Doctor. And now I have some views coming through. Please keep them coming. I will share them. But before I go on to the views, I'd like to come back to you, Mr. Senyange. You've mentioned some of the policies that Chira Motors Corporation has put in place to curb workplace harassment or gender-based violence in places of work. And I'm curious, do you think that some of the policies that you have put in place against harassment and abuse, do you think they can be adopted, or how can they be adopted by other institutions in other settings like schools,
Right.
universities and community centers?
Right, thank you so much. I think one of the ones that should be a no-brainer for all institutions is having a policy, a harassment policy in the human resource manual that has zero tolerance to any form of harassment to any gender. We need workplaces or institutions that really respect and protect the rights of all employees regardless of gender. And I think that really goes a long way into showing that commitment. On to what Doctor has said, I think uniquely about the United Nations Development Program, the Gender Equality Seal, what they do, they have a range of checks that you're supposed to tick off. And having that seal, we secured gold. We are not bragging.
Congratulations.
But I think it helps you. Like you talked about checks earlier. It helps you answer those basic questions, as in, do you have bathrooms for both men and women? It looks very simple, but even just something like that, you know, do you have lactation rooms for the mothers? Do you have...
That's very important.
Exactly. Do you have spaces for, you know, meditation or prayer, you know, at workplaces?
Yes.
Do you have support systems? Do you have a helpline? You know, we have a buddy system where, you know, people can talk to each other about different issues if they feel like they cannot take that to management.
Okay.
So really, really simple things that can be implemented into the daily operation of the company that can help you really strike for gold. If I can say.
Interesting.
Exactly.
Now, Doctor, coming back to you, thank you so much, Mr. Senyange. Let's talk about the survivors of domestic gender-based violence. What steps has the ministry taken to ensure survivors of gender-based violence are helped or are protected? And do they have any anything they get, you know, to start, like as a starting point?
Well, most of the focus has been put on supporting and encouraging women and girls, boys and men to report cases of violence. And once cases of violence are reported, then these cases are picked into the system. What do I mean by the system? The system in terms of access to services, appropriate services. I would want to give an example of, say, it's a case of rape. If it's reported, then it's reported to the police. That is a capital offense. Then that survivor is referred to different support services, access to the health facilities in terms of giving up PEP to reduce any pregnancy in case, but also responding to checking whether she's contracting HIV/AIDS and if there's any damage on the reproductive system, all that is handled by the health facilities. The same case is also referred to the courts of law for hearing. In case it is proved that so-and-so raped her, then the person is imprisoned to serve his sentence. So you find that alongside the different government ministries, departments and agencies, each of them is mandated to provide a specific service. So the cases that are managed well are able to, and the survivors of course, are able to access the services within the government of Uganda ministries, departments, and agencies. As Ministry of Gender, Labour, Social Development, we've also gone ahead to work with our development partners, civil society organizations, and NGOs to establish a number of GBV shelters. We call them GBV shelters, but these are really homes, reasonable homes, where a survivor can go and stays there for a minimum of 2 weeks to a maximum of 1 month when the case is being managed. Health facilities, health services, counseling in just in case the survivor needs some bit of counseling or she's traumatized. In some of the GBV shelters, there's training, skilling, not really complicated kind of skilling, but these easy skills that a survivor can pick and start, and when she goes out, she can start her life.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, I have some views coming through, and the first one is coming in from Opio Emmanuel, who says, I have a question. How can girl-child education be promoted in Uganda as a way of reducing gender-based violence? That goes to you, Doctor, briefly.
Thank you very much. That is an important question. All of us in Uganda, we are aware that government of Uganda is implementing universal primary education, universal secondary education, and a lot of skilling in the BTVET institutions are going on. So the intention is to ensure that all Ugandans, regardless of sex, regardless where you are, you have a right to access education. As a country, we've done relatively well in terms of promoting the right to education. Where we've witnessed a challenge is in terms of the young girls, adolescents that are dropping out of school, both boys and girls, but of course the percentage for girls is higher than that of boys. So government is also coming up with other innovative ways, for instance, skilling, to ensure that even these ones that unfortunately drop out of school, there are other options they can access in terms of making their lives better. Talking about child mothers, in 2022-21, the Ministry of Education also adopted the re-entry guidelines. For me, these are transformative because they are making it possible for the child mothers to go back to school after delivery.
That is very important, because our society always believes that once a girl child has a child, they're done for.
Out of the system. So these guidelines, they're giving an opportunity for the child mothers to continue with the education.
Thank you, Doctor. You said you had something to say about that?
Yeah, specifically, Kira Motors is having a partnership with the United Nations Development Program, and we launched the Electric Mobility Skilling Program at the Makerere University Innovation Pod. And what we're doing is really building the next generation of engineers, and we're very, very specific about inclusivity and, you know, adopting the gender responsiveness in this. So we currently have a class of 25, and we have 13 males and 12 females. And the emphasis really is beyond building, you know, skills for these young engineers in the electric mobility and electric vehicle technologies. Is you have a year-long program to learn all these technologies, but ultimately helping them navigate workplace dynamics that may face that may pose challenges to women in engineering. So we build their skills in that way, because we don't want to send them out and have to deal with how it is in the workplace. It's just really building their skills, both technically, but also in terms of how they can deal with any of those issues. So we are intentional about creating more space for women in the automotive sector.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I think in addition to, I would like to thank UNDP, because as a Ministry of Gender, Labour, Social Development, we are entering into Memorandum of Understanding with over 17 vocational training institutions in Uganda, where child mothers are going to get an opportunity to go back and get skilled in whatever skill they want. and this is already being paid for by UNDP. So I really celebrate this milestone. Amazing. Because the re-entry was encountering challenges where girls were saying, we don't have money to go back to school, who's going to look after my baby, what do I do? So this UNDP is coming in to help us address that biggest challenges that child mothers have been facing.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. Now, Erado Nelson says, he's also AKA Mr. Green, based in Budondo, Ginger. He says gender-based violence is caused by vulnerability. The only way to stop or prevent it is by being strict with abusers, and that's for the government to do. The next comment is from Nkurunungi Alexander. He says, hello, good morning, presenter. My name is Nkurunungi from Kabale district, currently in Kampala. And he has a question. If you enter in a relationship with a girl, then you finally impregnate her, but you decide to look after her with the baby because you're not ready to marry her, is it a form of violence?
It's as long as the girl is below 18 years, that is defilement. That is a capital offense.
What if the girl is of age, but he doesn't want
to marry her,
but
when
wants
the
to take care
girl
of the
is
child?
of age, they are free to his consent.
Okay.
Then that is a relationship.
Okay.
But I would also encourage him not to abandon the girl. Because by the time you enter into a relationship, most women are determined to maintain the relationship. So by deciding to abandon her and her baby, that is violence also.
Okay. Now the last comment is from Joe. He says, like Mr. Senyange has indicated, in this day and age, social media is a big enabler, and this is the one of the best tools we can use to build not only a safe environment with no gender-based violence, but also a younger generation that can break and live above the old unrealistic traditional and religious practices that support gender-based violence. I encourage that most of the attention be put to enlightening the young generation before the rest of the world shows them a different way. It is better they are targeted early enough through these online social media channels, which attract and command the attention of majority of the young. Like the African proverb says, better to shape a tree while it is still young than when it is mature. It will just break. Thank you so much, Joe. And this will bring us to the end of our conversation. I've been speaking to Dr. Angela Nakafero, who is the Commissioner Gender and Women Affairs at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting us.
And I've been speaking to Mr. Shaban Senyange, who is the Head of Workplace Safety at Chira Motors Corporation. They bring you the electric buses, and we have electric bikes and so much more. Thank you so much
for coming. It's been an honor. And thank you for involving the men in this discussion.
It's very important.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of Good Morning Uganda, for starting with us from 6:30 in the morning up until this minute. I'll see you tomorrow. My name is Olive Monica Najama. Catch you tomorrow. Good morning.
Live from UPC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda.
Juko.
Yo.
Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the Parish Development Model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation.